Ravinatha Aryasinha assumed duties on the 1st of December 2020 as Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the United States of America. Ambassador Aryasinha received his secondary education at Ananda College, Colombo. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Philosophy, Politics and Economics from the University of Peradeniya and a Master of Arts degree in International Relations from the University of Colombo. He was a Hearst Fellow in International Relations at the School of International Service, American University, Washington, D.C. in 2001 to 2002. Having joined the Sri Lanka Foreign Service in 1988, prior to his current appointment, he was the Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, serving from October 2018 to August 2020. As Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Aryasinha led the Sri Lanka delegation to the 74th UN General Assembly in September 2019, the first time a Sri Lankan Foreign Secretary has addressed the UNGA during the high-level segment. Other positions Ambassador Aryasinha held in Colombo and abroad include Second Secretary in the Sri Lanka High Commission in New Delhi, India in 1989 to 1991, on leave from the SLFS as National Information Officer in the Office of the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Sri Lanka in 1993 to 1995, and Director, Publicity and Foreign Ministry Spokesman in 1995 to 2000. He served in the Sri Lanka Embassy in the USA 2002 to 2006, where during the latter period he was the Deputy Chief of Mission with Ambassador rank. From 2007 to 2008, he was the Director General in the Public Communications Division and Foreign Ministry spokesman. From 2008 to 2012, he was Sri Lanka's ambassador to Belgium, Luxembourg, and to the European Union. Ambassador Aryasinha is presently the most senior officer in the service.
I'm Keshini Vijayagunratna, the Director of Project Management and Public Relations, and I have here with Chamod Amarasinghe, the Media Director from the Sri Lanka Foundation International. Today, I have the honor of speaking with His Excellency, Ambassador Ravinatha Aryasinha, the Ambassador to Sri Lanka for United States. Welcome, Ambassador, and Ayubowan.
Ayubowan, we're glad to be with you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your Excellency, you are one of the most senior officers to the Foreign Affairs, having joined in 1988. Can you give us details about your professional expertise in this area that led to the diplomatic positions you served?
Well, I don't think your viewers would want to be listening to that long story. But to cut it short, what I can say is that, I was a journalist to begin with, which I'm very proud about because joining Rupavahini in 1982, at a very young age, I had high-level access to, at that time, from prime ministers and leaders, presidents and leaders of the opposition, whom I had opportunity to interview, as well as foreign leaders. So you got used to high power politics at a very young age. And also, since you are a journalist, you could be a little more cheeky, which I was. But then later, my academic work took me to international relations. And then in 1988, I joined the Foreign Service, served in New Delhi initially. Then after that, a long stint in Colombo for about almost 7-8 years, particularly we're working with Minister Kadiragama as the spokesman of the Foreign Ministry. At a time, we were trying to find ways of countering LTT propaganda because they had got a very head start. After that, served in Washington, D.C., 2002 to 2006, the last part being Deputy Chief of Mission with Ambassador rank. And after that, after a brief stint back in Colombo as spokesman, I was appointed as ambassador to Brussels. At a time, GSP Plus was under a lot of threat. We managed to stretch it out. It eventually went, but after Sri Lanka could make the necessary adjustments to its understandings with some of the big importers in Europe. And because Sri Lanka was not willing to undertake commitments which it could not deliver on, which the EU was asking. From there, I went to Geneva in 2012, and I was there till 2018. So saw a lot of the human rights related issues. We didn't always agree, but we managed to make sure that there was a conversation with not only those we agreed with, but also those we didn't agree with. At that same time, there was possibilities of we chaired the conference in disarmament, Sri Lanka's opportunity, where I chaired it, and we brought about a consensus on some issues which had been outstanding for a very long time. We brought about understandings between Sri Lanka and those bodies like the Intellectual Property Organization, the CERN, the Nuclear Physicist Organization, and also a lot of work on the migration front, which helped our people. So with that background, I was Foreign Secretary after that in Colombo for 2 years, almost 2 years, and was an interesting time to, bring together all what you've learned throughout your career, both the positives as well as knowing where things go wrong. And I let history judge how one did, but I feel that we brought Sri Lanka back a little bit to the middle from one extreme. And also, I was very keen on ensuring that the Sri Lanka Foreign Service strengthens itself and officers of the Foreign Service get training and also get the proper place. And I was glad, one of the things I was most glad about in that period was, besides the policy shifts which we started in 2018, late 2018, and increased later, that the Foreign Service was able to, from 37% of heads of missions who were Foreign Service officers, increase that proportion to nearly 58%. So looking back, I feel very satisfied with the efforts we have taken. Not all have been 100% successful, but I think there was a lot of learning, and that's what I bring to the table since President Rajapaksa appointed me as ambassador to Washington effective from 1st of December.
Thank you, Ambassador, for sharing that very valuable information. We appreciate that very much. Ambassador, US has been an important development partner of Sri Lanka. Can you elaborate on how you plan to use this opportunity to further enhance relations with US?
Well, our relationship has been based, I think, on 3 things: shared values, common interests, and mutual respect. And I think all these 3 are equally important to emphasize. Shared values in democracy, rule of law, socio-economic development and rights to our people, and equitable economic development. And also our sense about our approach to the world. Sri Lanka and the US may not on every issue have the same position, because the US has differences with some countries whom we happen to be friends, and we want to be friends with all. And therefore, on occasions like this, we have to be respectful of each other's perspectives. But one significant thing is the Indian Ocean, where all countries want to keep the Indian Ocean as a region where there's a rule-based order in the Indian Ocean. And on that, Sri Lanka is very much consistent with the interests of all powers, including the United States of America. And that has been a very strong value we work towards. And with that, a common interest as well, because the navigation in that region, Sri Lanka being central to the Indian Ocean, we are very keen to leverage that strength. So while strategically we do not want to get involved in the power games, in big power games, and are very conscious that India security is very important and Sri Lanka must do nothing prejudicial to that security, we do want to stay open in terms of economic aspects so that everybody can come to Sri Lanka and invest and do trade and business with. The Colombo port city is offering a great opportunity for everyone to come to Sri Lanka and invest because there is very often this notion that it is Chinese built. If one goes by that token, there are many things in this country or in the rest of the world which is also Chinese built. But the point of the matter is that anybody can come and invest in the port city and enjoy the same benefits as anybody else. So I'm pushing that very hard here to make folks here understand that economically we are onto a trajectory that if we and the rest of the world can be honest about ourselves and understand the complexities of some of these issues and not make this a zero-sum game where you can be friends only with one at the exclusion of another, then I think we could develop considerably. On the economic front, we know that the US takes about 26% of our exports. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's fortunate that they do so, but unfortunately only about 25% is commodities other than apparel. And apparel does not benefit from the GSP, which is applied by the US, where there is a tax concession which is given. Only 25% don't have to come under GSP. So we are now pushing very hard to try to increase the commodities which are benefiting from GSP. And there is a conversation going on with both the USTR, which is the trade representative of the United States, and the Commerce Department here, and our officials. We are trying to make people in Sri Lanka more knowledgeable about what are the products and trying to see whether investment can flow from here to those products, because that could enter this market duty-free under getting the most favored nation treatment under GSP. So that is one area. The other, naturally, and also in the trade area, we see that while the big companies are doing business very well, there are a lot of SMEs in Sri Lanka and SMEs in this country, in the US, including some very talented and capable Sri Lankan startups and young entrepreneurs who want to do business in Sri Lanka and with Sri Lanka, but find bottlenecks. And we are trying to understand what these bottlenecks are and trying to ease their ability to do business with Sri Lanka, which will help everybody. Recently, Wes Edens, the chairman of New Fortress Energy, a very significant company, was in Sri Lanka and had a second visit as well for his team. And we hope that these will be a catalyst in encouraging greater US investment to Sri Lanka. US is now the 10th largest investor in Sri Lanka. Another important area on the economic side, naturally, is tourism. And in tourism, the US growth has been averaging about 20% each year. And we feel that particularly the traveler who goes from Sri Lanka are looking for a niche market, which Sri Lanka is increasingly providing. In fact, recently we had an engagement with the travel agents and travel writers in this country with chairman of the Tourism Authority, Kimarli Fernando, and other relevant officials, make them appreciate with the opening of the airport back for tourist travel that they can come and continue to enjoy Sri Lanka's capacity fully as we move forward. Across the globe with the US, we are partners on many enterprises. Disarmament is one, like I said. Then we also we both pay a lot of attention to climate change. We are very happy that the United States has rejoined the Paris Agreement, which it left some time ago, and even in disarmament, that they are reviving some of the disarmament instruments, which Sri Lanka has held very sacred, which were almost put into abeyance. Then on issues like youth empowerment, fighting against terrorism and transnational organized crime, including narcotics and human trafficking, we have been working very closely, and our defense departments are very closely connected, intelligence sharing. During the Easter Sunday attacks, we saw the value of the role played by the FBI. During COVID, we also appreciated very much receiving assistance from the United States in dealing with some of the issues we confronted. And they sent 200 ventilators at very short notice. At a time we really had to get ourselves up there. We did very well on COVID, but there were some pockets which needed attention, and the US was very helpful with it. So I believe that these shared values and common interests, and also mutual interest, and also mutual respect is vital, that we respect each other, and we respect sometimes the limits we can each go to, and that the relationship can be handled even when at times we don't agree with one thing or another, while there are many we can agree on. I mean, in this country, they say you can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we have to start working in a way where we have agreement and total agreement on some things, but there might be differences of opinion on others. And my pitch is that we must straddle that as a challenge and try to continue to strengthen our relationship. And there are enough areas on which we can cooperate very well while trying to reconcile whatever differences on others.
Thank you, Ambassador. Looks like you have a pretty concrete plan in place, and thank you for sharing that information. Your Excellency, the Human Council session in Geneva commenced this week. Sri Lanka is on the agenda, which is getting a lot of attention. As a person who has served many long years as a permanent representative in Geneva, how do you see this process evolving?
Well, I have no crystal ball to predict the future, but as someone who 5.5 years was PR, and then in the last two sessions, 2019 and 2020, was also integrally involved as Foreign Secretary in the positions we took. All I can say is that I've never seen so much disproportionate attention being given to Sri Lanka by the OHCHR at a time when Sri Lanka is at peace, at a time when, yes, it may not be 100%, but a lot has happened which has helped towards reconciliation. So disproportionate attention is a major problem because we feel that it is driven by political motivations rather than real issues on the ground. We also feel that the High Commissioner, in submitting a report, and my minister made this point very clear in his presentation, has unjustifiably broadened the scope and mandate of her work in a very arbitrary manner, which incorporating many issues of governance and other matters of a domestic nature, which are very much left to countries to comment, for instance, about the 20th Amendment, which is passed very constitutionally, is rather hypocritical because they can't even get countries which have pledged to do basic things to do those things. To make too much and, complain about delays in things happening in this last year, an year in which in this country people don't even meet face to face. And therefore, I think that, and also by throwing a political curveball into issues which sometimes have to be resolved among communities and within communities, which sometimes takes time because you have to bring people together. And that sensitivity is totally lacking in this time's High Commissioner's report. And it is due to this reason, and also that constitutes the shifting of goalposts, because 1 year ago, when together with the foreign minister, I sat with the High Commissioner to discuss the agenda and what we are doing. The issues were that Office of Missing Persons, the Office on Reparations, the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, that we continue to keep our engagement with the UN system, that we continue to work on the SDGs, and that we establish a system for accountability to be addressed. Now, all these things have been done. And when we sat 1 year ago, we didn't know that we were going to go into a period of total, where the world was going to turn upside down. But in spite of that, we have done all this. In fact, main pledge of the accountability mechanism was delayed somewhat, but the minister has given the clear reasons for that. COVID overall, but also the fact that you had to have a government in place, which the president was in power, but he was working with a parliament which was not his, which didn't have a majority to support him. Only August that happened. After August, there was the budget session which had to take precedence, which finished in November, and then this mechanism has been brought about. And a mechanism which has considered and carefully balanced off a lot of interests, headed by a Supreme Court judge who happens to be a Muslim, comprising a lady, former mayor of Jaffna, who happens to be Tamil, and two others who have experience both in the police service and in the public service. So similarly, on the Muslim burials, there were issues one was having to grapple with. There were different points of view. In this country, we are not sure whether people are debating whether to get vaccinated or not. There are huge debates about, whether you wear face masks or not. Those seem basic common sense things to do. But here, what we had to grapple with these is a reconciliation of different points of view, sensitive, of course, to the religious perspectives which were in play. And I think that it is very important that Sri Lanka be given the time and the space to come to these judgments through a process of working through them rather than being forced to do them. It is because of that the foreign minister yesterday had to reject the High Commissioner's report and state Sri Lanka's position very unequivocally and clear that we will continue to work with the United Nations on our issues which are on the table. We have no intention of disregarding them, but the pace and the priorities we will pick in them will have to go along with what we can carry. And the question finally the Human Rights Council will have to ask itself is whether they want undertakings of a host of undeliverable promises by governments who probably don't have the intent of delivering on them, or whether they are going to take on board and be sensitive when a government tries to reconcile within and come up with a deliverable measure which carries along the people. I think if you go back and look at the 30/1, there were a lot of pledges there. There was no accountability mechanism which came out for 5 years. There was no truth-seeking mechanism for 5 years. I didn't hear this same noise. But today, though a little late in the cycle, when an accountability mechanism has been placed before, and we go to the Human Rights Council with that strength, they are trying to throw the baby with the bathwater. I think that would not be the right way to go. Human rights is a delicate subject. We are respectful of it, but we have also come out of a crisis of 30 years where Sri Lanka has been pushed and pulled in all directions. And we believe that the international community, which is still struggling to overcome many of the issues which we successfully overcame 11 years ago, namely terrorism, must be sensitive to it and give us the space to work our way through these difficulties, because the government has pledged that it will do so. And to kind of make doomsday prophecies and try to use that to keep Sri Lanka in the dock is not only unwise, but it is totally unjustified in the context of the global challenges facing human rights as we speak.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much for addressing that issue. Great, thank you. Your Excellency, in January 2021, the embassy launched the Pan-US Overseas Sri Lankans Network. Can you tell us what goals are you trying to achieve from this project?
Something that I felt from my last posting here, 2002 to 2006, and we tried to address it to some extent with my then Ambassador Bernard Gunatilaka. And I think as far as the greater Washington area and maybe even the tri-state area, we got some synergy going. But what is important, I think, for a community to be identified and make an impression in their host society is unity and also being networked well. And it can help, as I have jokingly said, from directing a student who is in some city, unknown city, when he wants some help, and help can range from trying to have a good rice and curry meal in a city where he doesn't know any Sri Lankan, to being of use to somebody in these communities who want to make connections back home or who want to make connections with each other. That is the idea we had when on the 31st of January, after a month and a half of spade work, we launched the Overseas Sri Lankans Network. And we targeted initially to focus on 3 pillars, if I may. One is advocacy of Sri Lanka. Second, economic advancement. And third, socio-cultural engagement. Advocacy of Sri Lanka constitutes each person being an ambassador for Sri Lanka and carrying our message across. Now, you may vary on the nuance sometimes, but the basic message and making it known to people who are bombarded with a lot of disinformation churned out by pro-LTT vested interests, who are a small part of the Tamil community in this country from Sri Lanka, but who are the vociferous ones. We need to find Sri Lankans who are committed to also tell the counter narrative or their narrative of it, which might be different in each case. And this is the political advocacy we want our people to engage in, that is with their neighbors, their communities, their legislators, whether they are in state or whether they are at the federal level. And we believe that through this, through a better understanding of Sri Lanka's nuances and complexities and what we have actually come through, there will be a better understanding among decision makers in this country of all sides of the story, and then let's leave it to them to take a call on what is right and wrong. We do that all the time in Washington, engaging with leaders, these days largely on Zoom, which is a little bit impersonal, but nevertheless, you get through to more people as a result because you can time yourself much more easily. The second aspect is what I have called economic advancement. And here we are talking about business people from the United States who want to invest in Sri Lanka or import from Sri Lanka. We are talking about the exporter from Sri Lanka who wants to do the same in the United States. As I said, the big boys and girls are well off because they already have those networks. It is the SMEs and the small timers who need the help. And we believe that this network is reaching out to those people, because what we are doing is we have in this network nodal points in each state. And through that nodal point in a state, we are having discussions with people across that state. And through that, we are able to try to understand and learn the issues they face. And I must tell you, I mean, we have so far, on the 31st, we had about 27 states. As we speak, we have got about 33 states. And we have so far reached out to about 12 of these states, deep down discussions. And we have learned from them what is important to them. For instance, our website, some of the forms in it are cumbersome. Some of the information a little child who wants to make a speech about Sri Lanka wants is not quite there, ready-made. I mean, they don't want all the politics. They just want to know something which they can get in a nutshell. There are also the opportunity to connect people through the embassy. And these are the kinds of things which we are doing. And also it's very important that most of the buying these days is done online. And it is important that we encourage Sri Lankans both here and back home to try to also master and become savvy on the online marketing websites, so that then their products can penetrate the US market in a more effective way. And like I said, the SMEs are the focus. And I hope that people who are interested in trying to do business with Sri Lanka, whether overseas Sri Lankan or Americans of other origins, that they connect with the embassy in a better way. And we left the word overseas Sri Lankans rather than Sri Lankan Americans, so that that also encompasses the university student here, the short-term visitor here, somebody who might be traveling from time to time. So this is an umbrella under which we have all these categories coalescing. The third area of socio-cultural engagement is something which we have been doing. You have been doing it. Dr. J and your foundation has been in the forefront of this kind of activity. Each year you do this in a very significant way. We want that success story to be replicated. We also want other people who do similar things to be able to share that success story with you. And a very important category which we are targeting is the youth, because the future of Sri Lankan Americans in this country is to be carried by those who are today in their 30s and 40s. And the values of being Sri Lankan are being learnt right now by kids who are in their teens, in the Sunday schools, whether it is Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, or Muslim. That sense of bringing together. And to help that process, the embassy has, as a matter of policy, started celebrating the 4 major religious festivals in an equitable footing, so that we now are engaging all these communities. May not be the same numbers of all, but the embassy is open to all. And I think that is the main message which we have sent through this engagement. And we are hopeful that we can do more in areas which is important to the community. Now, besides these three pillars, we also are looking at clusters being developed, interest clusters. And those can be, as I said earlier, entrepreneurs. Those can be youth. Those can be academics. And also an important constituency we want to draw into this Sri Lankan family in the US is those US folks who have either visited Sri Lanka, who have taught in Sri Lanka, or have some connection to it, maybe a foster parent. We want to try to bring them into this network so that they all feel a connection with the country. And our hope is that this network, the Overseas Sri Lankan Network, will be a powerful vehicle. And what vehicle you want to drive on it will be up to each and every one of us. And by connecting you together, we must understand that once these networks are built, sustaining it will be less the burden necessarily on the embassy, but it will be the responsibility for it will be for all of us. You as much as this embassy, whoever follows will have a mechanism on which they can continue to foster the relationship, and hopefully that is what will ensure sustainability of the relationship. And if the embassy in some way is not interested in it, I believe that the community will want it, because once you've got a good thing going, I believe that sustainability of it is two-way. So that is the intention, and we are encouraged by both the reception we have had to the idea, the cooperation we have in it, and very appreciative of the suggestions, very constructive, which have been made, and the discussions, which are giving us an insight into nuances within states, within cities, which is hard to read a book or read the papers and understand. So I'm wanting to get a Sri Lankan perspective, something looked at through Sri Lankan eyes on the ground. And that is what, besides our two missions in New York and Los Angeles, and the honorary consul spread out in a few cities, every one of you who are involved with this process are in effect ambassadors and can play your part.
Wow, seems like a very productive project, Ambassador, and the Sri Lanka Foundation would love to support you and assist you in any way we can. And I look forward to being in the next meeting regarding this project. Ambassador, for the short time that you have been in office in Washington, D.C., I have been following the social media information. You are already heading to make huge changes with other new projects, and our community would love to hear about it.
Well, I think what we've basically been doing is pretty much, the engagement with the U.S. government has been, so far we have managed to, despite the limitations, touch base with all the relevant key agencies. The USTR was the last one, which I did last week. And I have shared with them, this relationship for me is not something new. There's a lot of continuity, both from my previous stint here, as well as I have been in touch with US ambassadors wherever I served, and including for 2 years in Colombo. So I have stayed on top of the brief. I may have sometimes nuanced views on things, and all I try to do is to share my perspective very respectfully with interlocutors and hear them out, and communicate back to my government the views in the form in which it's presented, and also to try to find solutions and reconcile wherever there are differences. And also conscious that sometimes our best efforts might not help reconciling. And in those instances, we've just got to bracket them and move on. I mean, we've done, similarly, we have worked on this OSL network. And also there's a lot of housekeeping, whether it's related particularly to the consular sections. Our communication strategy has been totally overhauled. The social media, I mean, the Twitter handle, the website, as you speak, there are changes being made, and all for the effort of making sure that we are connected well with our interlocutors. And our interlocutors are not only the Sri Lanka community. That's one part of our interlocutors, a very important part. But also the US government, non-profits. You might have seen recently, we are in conversation on trying to help get the increased support on demining. We are trying to engage folks working in the environment sector because we see synergies in it. In science and technology, we are trying to make some initiatives. There has been a conversation which started, in fact, the previous time I was here during the partnership dialogue, and also we are building on what my predecessors over the years have been doing. Each ambassador comes and leaves a footprint and has gone into certain aspects. I have tried to understand those and I've tried to build on them. I've tried to nuance some of them to go with the capacities and the times. We also have a new administration in Washington. So there is new connections to be made. So notwithstanding COVID and all that, and we've done all this while getting COVID itself. We've been knocked out for about 2 weeks. Half of my time, I think I've been here, I've been in quarantine. But nevertheless, myself and my team have been, they are clear on what the task is ahead. And we are together with the help of our interlocutors and the community, we are trying to make a difference.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm just curious, Your Excellency, what do you think the Sri Lanka Foundation and other Sri Lanka organizations in US can collaborate with the embassy in the future?
Very, very good question. And I think that's a question I will give you my take, but it is also something you must develop your take on, because the embassy is not wanting to replicate what you guys are doing. That's not our business. I lead sometimes and I'll follow in others. But what I really want to do is to be a catalyst, to bring people together, to connect people, whether it is Sri Lankans and Sri Lankans or Sri Lankans and the US government or business or whatever. I feel that practical things which we can do is one thing is, now Sinhala and Hindu New Year is coming up. We won't be able to have our Urdu Utsava all over like we did. Maybe, I don't know, in California you have a little more space probably to do that. But what we want to try to do is to take advantage of the circumstances we are in and expand a little bit. This time, Independence Day, we did it as a Zoom conference like with everybody across the country. We want to do independence, not just us being the single focus. We want to get pockets of cultural activity from a few cities. I hope California would be one, so that you can have Sinhala and Hindu New Year parties, 20 or whatever, 25. I hope the weather will be good so that we can have a little more. But we can do it from different locations and connect through the embassy's website or the Zoom link for that occasion, and bring together, because the Sinhala and Hindu New Year is a very important connection between the two main communities. And it gives us an opportunity to showcase our multi-ethnic, multicultural, multilinguistic traditions, some which have been under challenge and threat and difficulty, and which have been totally exaggerated in this country. We still look forward to Ramzan to go to our Muslim friends and taste watlappam. They love to come to eat kawang and cookies. We do the same with all religions and all cultural events. So we think that this will be the Single and Hindu New Year is something which brings all religions together. And that is one thing we want to try to do in this way. So that is a simple example. But in the meantime, I have already been on a lot of conversations. Most recently, last Sunday, I think it was, when the Ananda College Old Boys Association had a discussion on COVID. And I was invited to give my take on it. I learned a lot more than I could give those mainly doctors, particularly, and I think it is helpful that we have this conversation. The Royal College OBA did a dinner dance. It was interesting how you do a dinner dance over Zoom, but they raised a lot of funds, to which I was very appreciative, because it went to help COVID victims back in Sri Lanka and upgrade our facility. There is a group of young Sri Lankans in Richmond, in Virginia, who are doing a little newsletter, because there happen to be a lot of Sri Lankans down that road. It's called Hampton Road. So we are trying to link up with people who either ask for our help or we see that we can do something contributory, but we are not trying to replicate what they are doing. I'm very clear on that, but we will continue with this. And that's a very delicate balance you have to find to connect people. And once they are connected, lean back a little and let that connection take root. I hope that bringing people together in this way, they'll be meeting people across the country. There is a business chamber, a US Sri Lanka business chamber, which has largely been tri-state. It has been dormant for the last few years. We have revived it. They are now getting active. And now what are we offering? We are offering them an opening through our network, because we are identifying who are the ones who are interested in business. And we can connect those folks to these folks who are already doing something. And that is, I think, the future in that kind of area. My suggestion would be that even from these connections, what you guys could be doing is to try to do things like Sri Lankan-owned business fairs. I saw recently that there was a lady who was doing tea, Sri Lankan tea, and how she promoted it, called Tea Drops. It was fascinating reading about it. I hadn't known about it. I saw it in the media. So, this is the kind of people whom we spot through these, what we are doing, and then we try to engage with them and try to connect and help them if we can, and also get their help when we can. For instance, if every shop selling Sri Lankan products, and doesn't have to be a Sri Lankan owned one, also has a leaflet relating to Sri Lanka tourism, we can reach a very wide audience. And we are making those connections. Another important area, I think you do that already, but I would like you to look at is in trying to help people on careers. With so many options, it's not easy for particularly young ones. And I have a 16-and-a-half-year-old, so I know what this challenge is. But what is important for them is to have as much information as they can, so that they can make educated judgments and be informed of what other people are going through. And that is true even in terms of studying with COVID, because everybody is having the same problem. And how you deal with it, what kinds of things parents can do, what kind of things children can do, are very important, that there is that inter-exchange as we go forward. But pay attention to things like career fairs within states and even across states. And also our university student population is very significant and diverse. We must try to get them connected so that then they are more powerful and strong in carrying the Sri Lanka flag as they do their studies, which is the prime thing they should be doing. But I'm sure they can find a little time to support their country, which gave them free education, which for many of the professors who are currently in the US holding very high positions, each time I hear, which I'm extremely proud of, to give back a little. They are giving already a lot, but I believe that helping the next generation who, and not necessarily to come to the United States, but those in Sri Lanka need mentoring as well. And I'm encouraging people to mentor from here. It's self-seeking sometimes when you are trying to get the best brains from Sri Lanka to the United States. That's taking away from Sri Lanka. That's fine in some cases where I think you need to go, that person needs to move to the next level. But similarly, I encourage people to give back by also empowering young people, whether in high school or in universities or young professionals, to do better through a process of mentoring. We are going to try to also get interested Sri Lankan Americans an opportunity to go and mentor in Sri Lanka during summers or any breaks, gap years, and try to connect them to probably the big business houses whom they individually might not have a connection, but we might be able to commend a student based on what they have done back to a Sri Lankan blue chip company. So these are the kinds of ways in which I think associations and we could work together, and that's what we are doing.
Sounds great, Ambassador. Actually, I look forward to being a part of the SingleHindu New Year because we have a large cultural department, and we look forward to that. And also the
Find your best item and let us know so that we can put that one.
Yes, definitely. My final question to you, Ambassador, is there a message you would like to convey to our community at this time?
Well, I think the point I want to convey, and I say this, having, heard a cross section, it is like a bit of a listening tour to me, and a good one, because I don't presume, I've been away from the US for, US has never been away because it has been there one way or another wherever I was. But I'm kind of getting a little more of the nuance through these interactions, the nuance in US and also the nuance and the dynamics of the Sri Lankan community. And what I want to tell members, particularly of the Sri Lankan-American Americans and those who are studying here and everybody, is that to try to understand that we can't do everything at once. We need to prioritize what is most important. We have to, and they have to, and when we work together, we have to together do that. The second thing I believe is that we have to stay united in doing that. We can't do only what one partner wants or another. We have to try to carry everyone along. The tide must be strong enough to lift all the ships. So it is important that whatever times we come into points where there are any differences of opinion, and there are many, we are divided in our opinion on some things. And if it was easy, we wouldn't have had to fight 30 years, a ruthless terrorist organization to find peace in the country. These are delicate balances one has to strike, and one has to be conscious of trying to get there. And the path you tread is as important as the goal. And I believe that in that process, sometimes you've got to bracket some differences and work on the things which you can agree on. And once you work on the things you can agree on, then you can go into the more difficult things. And last of all, be always conscious that while you here are looking back at Sri Lanka from a sense of nostalgia or a sense of what you see in the headlines, there is also the actual lived experience in the country. And people in Sri Lanka today, the time I was a young adult or my youth and my most of my professional life, you know, when you went to school or to work, you were not sure that you came back. Parents, mothers, and fathers, one took the train, one took the bus, because if something untoward was to happen from a explosion, a bomb blast, that there would be one parent. So I think it is very important that we locate ourselves in the present, understand that there are difficulties which have to be straddled, but from those difficulties and from the experience of straddling some of those will arise the capacity to get on to straddling the more difficult ones. And I think if we can do that, the Sri Lankan American community in the United States, though numerically small, can be a very powerful community because brain power wise, economic capacity wise, and also in terms of ideas wise, we are no less than any other community. And trying to get those, there will always be in a community those who are the active people and those who will support. And we must keep both groups together as we move forward. So that is my message, if you like. And I want to assure you that the embassy will walk this journey with all those who want to walk it, and try to do good both by Sri Lanka and in strengthening the US-Sri Lanka relationship, which is the responsibility of this mission.
I think that's a very valuable, important message you gave the community. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador, for speaking with us today. And I want to wish you all the best and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kashini and Chamod.